Okay, so I hope I'm audible. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Imagining Abolition 2021 gathering, and welcome to our workshop. My name is Shailesh Kumar. He, his, him are my pronouns, and I'm a member of the uh, organizing team and the moderator for this workshop. And I want to make you aware that closed captioning is available to view a live transcription. You can click the live transcript button on the bottom menu and select show subtitle. Also, in order to secure the space, you cannot rename yourself once you have entered. We are sorry if you were unable to add your pronouns to your name already, but we urge you to do so before you log into the next session, I mean. Uh, and in dreaming of this event, our team was inspired by words adapted from Project NIA. Abolitionist futures are not compatible with white supremacy, settler colonialism, misogyny, heterosexism, transphobia, ableism, and classism. The hope our team has for this session is that organizers, presenters, and participants, particularly those of us who carry a lot of privilege, are mindful of the differential impacts of power and have the courage to hold to account anyone here who exercises power in ways that enact harm. If one of our organizers removes you from this session, our intention is not to punish nor to exclude you, but to practice care for the abolitionist community we are building. So, with that, on that note, I'll welcome Angelique as well and let her take forward the workshop. Thanks, Angelique.
Awesome, and thank you for that. Uh, I will share my screen now with you folks from the presentation. Awesome, if I could just get a nod if you guys can see it. Awesome, so as today, we will be going over theory to action, so using research to strengthen the prison abolition movement. My name is Angelique. Awesome. Just first and foremost, going over a land acknowledgement. I want to recognize that everyone is gathering from various different places in the world. So this is a personal land acknowledgement, and I would encourage everyone after today's session to figure out which lands that you're currently occupying and pay tribute to those. I'm currently situated on the traditional territories of the Mississaugas, a greater branch of the Nishnawbe Nation, which includes Algonquin, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi. These are currently covered under the Williams Treaty and are the traditional territory of the Mississaugas, as I stated. These lands are home to numerous indigenous nations and people, and I'm thankful for those who have cared for Turtle Island, also known as North America, from before the arrival of my ancestors, the settlers, until this day. Most importantly, recognizing this history has been tainted by poor treatment and a lack of friendship with the First Nations people who have called us home. And again, I encourage everyone who is listening today to take a moment after today's sessions to figure out whose lands that you're currently situating on and pay tribute to those lands. Moving forward, so hello, my name is Angelique. I use she and her pronouns. I am a third-year political science student at Ontario Tech, and I currently work with our Student Engagement and Equity program as a programs assistant. Additionally, I do work for Raise Your Voice, which I would love to share with you folks at the end of the presentation, especially with those looking to prioritize youth perspectives, as this movement is to strengthen those voices. So I would love to share that with you at the end of today's presentation. So for today's agenda, it's going to start out with kind of a presentation similar to this one, where we're going to be looking at how to mitigate bias, best practices when entering this ongoing conversation of abolitionists and calling out bullshit and the best ways to research kind of these movements. Then we're going to be engaging in an activity. So this is the theory to action portion, where we're going to be taking these topics from the conference itself and diving into those to define what these principles are and creating some calls to action. So giving you something tangible after today's presentation to do, to put your kind of your effort towards. Afterwards, we're going to be doing a debrief. So I would encourage each group to elect somebody from their group to kind of debrief what your answers to the questions that are laid out for you. We're going to be using Jamboard, and I'll explain that a little bit more towards the end. And yeah, moving right along. So what is bias? That is a huge part when we're talking about research, is trying to figure out where bias lies and how to kind of mitigate this. So first and foremost, we're entering an ongoing discussion related to this conference. And first and foremost, you don't know what you don't know. And so when entering an ongoing discussion, it's important to listen and research prior to becoming active in that movement. So my kind of research for this conference is listening in on people and figuring out, where do I not know enough, where do I need to research more, and which session should I go to kind of fill those voids in those gaps in my knowledge. You also kind of want to take account for conscious and unconscious bias, and that sounds a little bit like an oxymoron. How can you take account for the unconscious biases that you may have? And that brings it back to kind of point one. When we're entering these conversations around equity related issues, one needs to account for these just solely because you are entering an ongoing conversation. So just to kind of explain what those words mean very briefly, conscious is biases that we are aware of, whereas unconscious is something that might be repressed and that we're unaware of. And then looking to mitigate these biases. So biases are everywhere, and there's no way kind of to stop these from occurring, but there's definitely ways, as we stated before, to mitigate these kind of effects. So first and foremost, looking at ways to use multiple different resources, especially those that refute your own. Because when you do research, you kind of want to stay at a non-biased aspect when you do your initial research to then fully grasp what your opinion on that topic is. And so looking for people that hold an opposite opinion is a great way to kind of like to keep yourself accountable without coming into a conversation with an already preconceived notion. Secondly, keeping track of the information that you've gained and where does it come from. Asking yourself, why has somebody published this kind of paper? Where did this knowledge come from, and why is this a reputable source? As well as checking media bias. So one website that I use regularly as a political science student is Media Bias Fact Checker. So it looks at where major news networks kind of fall into the political spectrum. And so that's very important to me as a political science major, because I need to know where to find the refuted kind of opposite opinion lies. And again, one huge thing as well is calling out bullshit, and what does that actually mean? So there's a difference between old age and new age. So old age kind of refers to when a speaker is trying to persuade an audience to believe in the legitimacy of their words and actions without kind of proving why. So this could look like propaganda, or somebody who's very charismatic, where their words are very vague and could apply to anything, but they're not really saying anything. Whereas with new age bullshit, we kind of see that with news articles and research papers, where you get this overload of big data, facts, graphs, and stuff that when you look up closely don't kind of line up. And so those are two things that we need to take account for when we're doing our research, is looking at where are people trying to persuade us and add these details in. I would encourage everyone after today's session to kind of look at where I got this information from and where I researched it from. Is the University of Washington, which the link will be included in the Jamboard that we'll be completing after. And lastly, before we start our activity, just kind of looking at some best practices when researching. So first, you want to make sure that you're keeping a system that takes track of that information. So for myself, I use a Google form, which goes through who wrote it, why did they write it, what is the information that I'm gathering from it, just to keep track of where all this information comes from. Because as we're in the 21st century, there's this globalization of all this knowledge that we have, and there's nowhere to put it because you're just learning and consuming every second of every day. And so it's kind of hard to keep track of where did you get that from. So one method I use is Google Forms, and then creating an Excel sheet out of those to keep track of, to be accountable first and foremost of the knowledge that I'm gaining. Secondly, using external resources to check the data for the sources that you're consuming. So again, moving back to that media fact checker that I was discussing with you folks earlier. Also, when you're doing research, the most effective way is to look at the resources that are available to you. So then research in itself is not a solitary kind of activity. As researchers, our hugest thing is to educate the public and to kind of expand others' knowledge with ours. So when you're entering an ongoing conversation, and I've said that a bunch of times, my apologies, you want to make sure that you're using whatever resources that are available to you. A huge one is librarians. They are a well of knowledge and they understand these kind of databases in other places. And so I encourage all of you to look at your public libraries, your university libraries, any library that you have access to. Librarians are fantastic when it comes to kind of starting your journey on researching. Also, again, looking at online databases, depending on your topic, also looking at community members for those first count stories. And also, lastly, to kind of address barriers to access, pay what you can or request what you can't. So when you're researching, a lot of databases have like paywalls and it makes it harder to actually access information. And that it isn't the most accessible for people to always be paying for these kind of things or have the ability to access them. So one tip that I have for you is emailing the researchers and asking them if you can kind of engage in a conversation about their findings. So then you don't always have to be paying for these resources. Awesome. And one quote I want to leave you with before we go into the activity is assume nothing, question everything. So asking those whys, questioning where knowledge comes from, questioning where your own knowledge comes from, and breaking down those assumptions and those biases that come along with it. Awesome. So we're going to be doing a Jam board, and I'll give each group 15 minutes to kind of complete this activity. And in those groups, you're going to be with a bunch of other people, and your team is going to have a topic to research with a few kind of leading questions for you to kind of figure out where you want to research, because 15 minutes isn't a lot for these topics. They're very broad. So come back with at least 2 resources. And again, come back with a call to action. That is a huge part, something tangible for you folks to have at the end of this. And these questions are only guiding ones, so you can definitely change them, adapt them to fit kind of your topics. And also huge importance is electing somebody from your team to talk to the rest of us at the end to kind of educate us on the topic. So we will be dispersing into breakout rooms. I will throw the link in the chat. Sorry, I'm just gonna stop sharing. One moment. Awesome. And then there is a link in the chat from Megan. If everyone can go to that, that is our Jam board for today. And then we'll be breaking off into breakout rooms. Awesome. I think that should be everyone back. I'd love to call James to speak first. I could hear you talking in the breakout rooms, and I'm so excited to hear what your group has came up with.
The first question is, what is the prison industrial complex? And so to some extent, most of our group acknowledge that we have somewhat limited information on that. But to the best of my ability, I'll try to explain it. It has to do with the marrying or merger, if you will, of, did I get, okay, you changed my screen. The merger of prisons and industry and, the economy here. Well, I guess it's not limited to the United States. I've only really talked about this term in relation to the US. But, in the capitalist system, the profits that are generated from that situation allow the prison industry to grow, if you will. And the more we become dependent upon those profits that are generated from that system and the cheap labor that is brought forth from that system, the less likely we are to do away with that particular system. So it has to do with self-preservation. The more we begin to entertain the idea that prisons are a necessary entity in our society, and the more in which these companies, hold on, baby, the more in which these companies begin to assume that there are profits to be gained by investing in those particular organizations, and the more there's cheap labor to be utilized in our capitalist system, right? The more that complex nature of prison and industry and economy, profits, et cetera, cheap labor and make labor becomes commonplace in our society. So that's it in a nutshell, impromptu. Am I supposed to go on and answer the other question?
No, you're good. Sorry, I was trying to find the mute button. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. If I could get our next group to speak, raise your hand and then I'll just call on you folks. That would be for our medical industry complex. It looks like you guys have a lot written, so I'd love for somebody from your group just to quickly present your findings in maybe like a 1 to 2 blurb. If not, that's completely fine. I'll just kind of summarize what I see.
Molly Rose.
Molly.
Oh, awesome.
Just looking for, you can unmute yourself whenever you like, Molly, and I'll spotlight you.
Hello, here from the UK. So wonderful to be here. We had a really invigorating discussion. So we started by talking through this definition, which one of our group found online, which says, as you can see on the screen, the medical industrial complex refers to the health industry, which is composed of this multi-billion dollar enterprises, including doctors, hospitals, nursing homes, insurance companies, drug manufacturers, etc., etc., etc. So we started from that like quite broad understanding of what the medical industrial complex is, and then we spoke about the ways that actually it's bigger than that definition. It's about like psychiatric institutionalization, things like insulin rationing within the US. And we also touched upon how actually it's quite different within the UK. We don't have the same kind of multi-billion dollar system in place, like we have a NHS, National Health Service. So the way that this medical industrial complex operates is by working alongside immigration and border regimes. So we have something called the hostile environment within the UK, which works through our National Health Service, works with the police and the immigration to prevent people who don't have status within the UK from accessing any medical health, charging people from other countries huge amounts of money to profit. So similar and different. And then kind of if you are found through the NHS, you're incarcerated in detention centres. So we then moved into talking through these root causes, and obviously capitalism was the first glaring root cause, and then we touched upon things like patriarchy. Someone from the group shared some beautiful knowledge about how there have been these moves away from traditional, more radical community ways of doing healthcare, and they pinpointed this as like arising in the like 1900s, and I don't know if they want to say more than that, but more on that, but it was really interesting what they shared. We spoke about individualism and the way that it's intertwined with capitalism, and then I shared this stuff that around carcerality, and like carcerality being one of these root causes alongside things like racism and sexism and homophobia and homo-nationalism, and this idea that carcerality is this thing that ebbs and flows through institution systems and bodies that seeks to render other bodies as objects through controlling and confining. And then we spoke a little bit about these prominent theories, activists and voices. We spoke about like Ben-Moshe Liat, who does a lot of work on deinstitutionalization, Dr. Swamim Singh, a US cardiologist, and then some like groups who are doing amazing work. So like Docs Not Cops, who are a UK group, general conversations surrounding universal healthcare in the US. I can't see this one, but Insulin for All, Frontline Medics, who's a US group, community mutual aid work, and there's a couple of other groups that we didn't pop on there, but I think that was the bulk of what we got through.
Awesome. I'm just gonna head on to the next group. And again, this Jamboard is going to be accessible for everyone after the workshop as well. So you can definitely debrief on these once everything is said and done. I'm just gonna head over to the school to prison pipeline and give you like 1 minute to debrief all this wonderful information that you have here, just so then we can conclude the workshop. Sorry for rushing. You can definitely just unmute yourself and go for it. 30 seconds or less. I'm not seeing anyone raise their hand, which is a-okay. Again, this Jamboard will be accessible for people once the workshop is over. I'm just going to hop to our closing remarks just because we do only have a few more seconds of time. And then, yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for your time today. And for going over this with me. I know a lot of this is basic information, but it is really good to go over these kind of principles again. And if you want to get in touch with me, here's a few places, but I think we are done for today's session.
Okay, so thanks so much, Angelique, and thanks to everyone. We'll see you in other sessions. Thank you.